With some phenomenal boss fights and an even better narrative to complement, The Force Unleashed was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Its unique and revolutionary approach to Star Wars combat pushed forward a new generation of games, most recently Fallen Order, and soon its sequel. Coming in, I didn't know what to expect, and coming out, I have nothing but praise for this game, and if anything, I just want to preface by saying this video should have been out 2 weeks ago, but I've had a lot going on. But I'm back and good to go, so let's get into it with one of the most obnoxious boss fights in history. I tend to favor cinematic and epic boss fights, and while this checks out both in terms of being cinematic and epic, it is still the most repetitious boss I've ever had the misfortune of experiencing, and I originally had a huge script for this thing, but I'll cut to the chase and make a short little montage of a couple things I find obnoxious. Fuck those power cell things, fuck the TIE Fighter respawn rate, fuck how long this takes. You know what, I'll just save the time having to edit in all of these, and play it at 10 times speed. Once again, that was 10 times speed. For reference, you can watch the entirety of the original trilogy in a bit over 30 minutes at 10 times speed. Whoever made this, fuck 'em. This is a rare case where the boss would be higher up if it was a one-time thing, but there are minimum 10 to 20 of these guys starting from Imperial Kashyyyk up to even the DLCs, and in addition the Purge Trooper is mechanically basic. It was pretty careless from LucasArts to reuse these guys at every major or even minor combat section for that matter, and due to them being almost everywhere for the entire second half of the game, they have no right being any higher than where they already are. It's an AT-ST meant for construction, and that qualifies a unique mini-boss for me. Near the end of the TIE Fighter factory, there's a lone AT-CT and a crowd of stormtroopers and rebels. Use force grip on anything it pulls in with its tractor beams, and otherwise enjoy the badass finisher. It's basically the AT-ST from Fallen Order, but made in 2008. A lack of a consistent parrying mechanic plus the obscene fire rate is a bit of a double whammy, but they're still very cheesable through force lightning and aerial combos, plus once again the quick time was pretty awesome. Basically just try to stay as airborne as possible. I gotta say, the AT-KT kicks ass. That being said, Ozzix Stern was a dickbag, so getting to smear my excrement all over his whip was a feeling second to none. While it was a fun fight, the AT-KT wasn't very mechanically demanding or challenging, so for what it is, it's passable but nothing more. I was shocked to see I had to take on a Rancor on Felucia. Not that I was terrified of the hulking beast Luke managed to beat with a bone and a rock, but more so that there were Felucian Rancors, something that even considering my vast knowledge of the Star Wars universe, I had no idea existed. My interest peaked once the fight began, however, mainly because there's not a lot to these guys. They throw dung balls and swipe at you, and like the Purge Troopers, they show up everywhere after their initial appearance, such as this 3-way Starkiller spit roast. They have decent health, but with use of the Sith holocrons placed around the arenas, you'll easily put down these ferocious creatures. The Junk Titan was one menacing motherfucker during its introductory cutscene. It makes its one and only appearance during your first visit to Raxus Prime, which if you didn't know is the introductory level to Force Lightning and Lightning Grenades. Lightning Grenades are hard to pull off just due to how long they take, but this is one of the few instances where they're actually meant to be used, and there just so happens to be a nicely lined up array of scrap metal you can hurl at the Junk Titan. Fire 3 of these things and it should do the trick, and there's even the damage increased Sith holocron on the other side of the arena if need be. Throughout the rest of Raxus Prime, and even in the Kazdan Paratus fight, Junk Titans show up, and it's a fun note how there are multiple QuickTime variants, but apart from that, they're all the same outside of setting. If they didn't look so awesome, I'd have forgotten about the Shadow Guards ASAP. The only fight that even stands out is the Kashyyyk one because you don't fight. In the other two encounters, they utilize their lightsabers and force abilities to counter any sort of force powers you throw at them, so as long as you avoid the force and rely on your lightsaber skills, you'll come out besting the Emperor's personally chosen. From here on out, the list is pretty subjective, and I only have minor criticisms for the remaining majority, which speaks to the quality of bosses in the game. I wish the Bull Rancor expanded on the Felucian Rancor, like maybe it could have been a bit bulkier and had more unique mechanics, but as is, it's essentially a reskinned Rancor with more aggression. The same goes for Jabba's Rancor. It's a cool fight set in a hypothetical world where there's Darth Starkiller and Vader is dead, but all the while it's the exact same fight mechanically. You can actually kill him with the gate like Luke, not a carbon copy of the original, but it's still a pretty neat touch. And man, do I wish the Rancor had a unique eating animation for the Gamorrean guards. What a letdown that he just loses track of you and stomps them to death. Of course, in the Bull Rancor fight, Maris Brood occasionally joins in and takes a bite at you, but she has little to no impact, and if anything, she creates scenarios where shit like this happens. While not expansive or even noteworthy outside of atmosphere, the Bull Rancor and Jabba's Rancor are fun and do their job as filler boss fights. And here we go, from pet to pet owner, Maris Brood is the worst Jedi due to her plain easiness and heavy dependence on a mediocre mechanic. Like all core boss fights, she gets abused by the mechanic introduced in her respective level, for her it being the Force Lightning Shield. Maris negates this by going invisible, but like the Shadow Troopers, you can just track her, and even if you don't catch where she's going, all that does is slightly delay the inevitable. You can do literally whatever you want as long as it involves lightsaber and lightning moves. She gets manhandled by all forms and sorts of lightning combinations, so really just do that and you'll be in the clear. The quick time is a top 5 in the game. It makes her seem oddly powerful and way better of a duelist and force user than during her actual fight, but also brings up the question, why the hell didn't Galen kill her? I mean, she's clearly a dark side user. She managed to bleed her crystal in what I'm assuming is less than a month between visits to Felucia, but also got off the hook by reassuring, yeah, word, I'll change again. I don't know, I mean, whatever. Once again, Maris Brood is a fun boss fight that's only held back by a limited moveset and reliance on repetitive and boring mechanics. The Rogue Jedi / Kento Merrick was fantastic, but only held back because he's part of the introduction. Plain and simply, he's pretty standard and far too easy to commend. At the same time, what isn't there to enjoy? You're Darth Vader and you're squaring off against a Jedi, and a powerful one at that takes insane focus to both stop a TIE fighter in motion and then forcefully slam it on the ground towards your opponent. And even with all my praise, Kento Merrick is no match for Vader. You can use anything at your disposal and you will toy with him like he's a rag doll. The quick time, while not expansive, was straight up embarrassing, and the ending cutscene never fails to give me goosebumps, mainly thanks to Anakin's betrayal in the background. Kento Merrick did his job very well, and thus deserves a mid to high spot. This is the first tried and true challenge of the game in my eyes. Rom Kota can be quite the task for new players, and he's packing extreme variety for early game that admittedly busted my shit up. Rom as a character was nailed on the head by LucasArts. His development and personality was stretched out over the course of the game, and him only being blinded and thus surviving improved the game and story majorly, although you can also thank him for the Star Destroyer. He teaches you how to control aggression as well. For example, go in for a 4-hit combo that sends him flying and then use Force Grip to toss him around for extra damage, and in the meantime while he gets up you lay off to recover your force meter and repeat the process. Obviously, by the end of the day, it's not an immensely deep fight. He has some force powers and combos among others, but as the second major boss, he had much more in his arsenal than anyone else up to that point. From a progression standpoint, Boba is the easiest boss in the game, and he gets massacred by anything and everything you throw his way. His main gimmick is his jetpack, which stays on the entire time, meaning you have to rely on, you guessed it, Force Lightning. You can also use Force Repulse, which sends him harpooning en masse, but that's more for comedic relief over actual efficiency. He's also got a deflector shield that while on deflects lightsaber attacks and conveniently is only shut down through lightning. And while playing as the Dark Apprentice, your force meter is amped like crazy, making it all the more easy. Just check out how much damage this stuff does. In trend with the DLC in general, the fight setup is awesome. You take him on in Jabba's sail barge garage with the dunes of Tatooine and the setting binary suns in the far horizon. The arena itself also has its fair share of nice details, such as the large gas tanks which can be used to Boba's advantage because he can blow them up, or such as in this case, just blow himself up. Every so often a group of 3 or so Gamorrean guards enter the fray, but by this point you've fought damn near 50 of them, and honestly they're better used as slabs of meat hurled at Boba over the far more boring classic disposal method. Disappointing I can't shoot him out to the Jundland Waste though. And by the way, I've mentioned a fair share of QuickTime events so far, but this one probably takes the cake. Alex watched an all boss video on this game, and the one thing he texted me was how funny Boba's was. Watching him get passively smashed to smithereens is the most underrated scene in any major Star Wars media. I love this fight for the most part. If it was a bit more difficult or negated Force Lightning, it would be much higher on this list, but as is, Boba, like most bosses, croaks on impact from lightning and thus loses major points for me. Also, it's pretty cool that D. Bradley Baker voiced this fight. The Emperor was flawed and was nowhere near as mechanically deep as I'd hoped, but for one, holy cow did they nail his theme. Palpatine's original theme is up there with like Anakin vs Obi-Wan and Darth Vader's Rage as some of the best Star Wars has to offer. This version's like an epic battle variant, and it's disappointing the fight doesn't live up to its soundtrack's billing. The main issue is how most of his mechanics are unique to him, which on paper sounds fine, but they're unexplained and somewhat illogical, meaning you just kinda have to deal with taking large amounts of damage. Nowhere in the game does it teach you to reverse lightning an object, nor does it teach you to deflect Sith lightning, although to be fair that should have been the first thing I thought of looking back. After every quarter of his health, Sidious floats up in an enclosed shield and brings in 2 enemies, each segment increasing in enemy difficulty, beginning with 2 Imperial Senate guards and eventually ending with 2 Royal guards. I am glad they added these freebie health sections because otherwise the large surplus of bullshit would have made it nearly impossible to survive. Palpatine is quick and dashes a lot, so stay close to him, and while he's not invincible, try to be as aggressive as possible. Once it's all said and done, you get the iconic shot of Starkiller holding off Palpatine, and I prefer this ending to the other one, mainly because I like Vader more than Starkiller, and it actually gives a pretty good reason for Sidious not being on the Death Star in A New Hope. While sorely disappointing, the Galactic Emperor was energetic and fun and still a pretty decent time, but it's sad to see it fall this low because I truly believe there's a great boss hidden under the miscues of its current form. What do you know? It's yet another boss made around Force Lightning. Take that with a grain of salt though. In fairness, Kazdan Paratus is the boss of the first Raxus Prime mission, and his job is to teach you how to fully use said mechanic in combat, so if anything, it's just unfortunate that so many other bosses followed suit. It was a pretty awesome reveal that the Scrap Guardians and Junk Titans found throughout the mission wasn't just the Force having it out for you, but rather an ex-Jedi Master gone mad trying to prevent you from raiding his sacred temple. How the hell this guy built an entire life-size recreation of the Jedi Temple on his own, I couldn't say, but it does make for a really cool setup during the fight. The poor dude's gone mad by this point and lives alone in the High Council chamber, talking with the fellow council members he built from scrap as if they were real. So with all that said, for a batshit crazy blind Jedi, he is powerful. Kazdan's extremely quick and difficult to anticipate due to his spider-like mechanical body and elongated lightsaber hilt. He's most vulnerable during attack animations such as the forward charge, and from there zap him and toss him for maximum profit. Let me take a moment to say I'm making it all sound easy peasy, but trust me, you won't come out of this first portion with a ton of health. To compensate, twice during the course of the fight he backs off and forms a Junk Titan from the surrounding materials. There's no added gimmicks or anything, just you're without the help of Sith holocrons and have to rely on skill. It's not a big deal, they're still very easy to beat, which is nice because they also give back most, if not all of your health. Then, for the rest of the fight, he'll situate back and forth between the normal combat and hanging from a pillar, which can be a bit tricky, but once you figure it out, it's a free chunk of health on his part. Once again, the fight finishes off with a brilliant quicktime, and the ending cutscene is somewhat touching. So, while it is visually beautiful, but mainly fun, Kazdan Paratus is once again an early game boss hindered by a lack of mechanical depth. Obi-Wan Kenobi is completely exposed to anything, and sure, while he does toss you around a bit in return, check how it does basically nothing to my health bar. Old Ben does have a couple neat tricks up his sleeve, like a reverse move that inverts your directional controls and randomly flips around your abilities, but is generally harmless. And that's fight 1 in a nutshell. He's got no health nor any damage, meaning he plays completely defensive, and simple solutions like flipping over his swings leave him open to dangerous counters on your part, and it makes for nothing more than a beatdown. Then after another monster finisher where you literally toss him into the Millennium Falcon's thrusters, he becomes a Force Spirit. This was done very well, or at least realistically, but it's still easy once you crack the gimmick. Since Obi-Wan's a spirit comprised of the living force, he can interact with physical objects but can't be touched by physical objects, meaning your lightsaber is rendered useless. Now let's have a guess at what mechanic could possibly be the solution to this issue. Yeah, shocker, it's Force Lightning. However, you do need to perfectly time your attacks to get in damage, so true to his iconic quote from A New Hope, Obi-Wan is far more powerful in spirit form than he was as Old Ben. If you make use of moves like the Saber Slam, it shouldn't be too bad, and while electrified, Obi-Wan is vulnerable to your normal lightsaber anyways. Try to avoid his attacks and zap him when he charges up a special move, and otherwise feel proud you've beaten the best of the 3 DLCs. Set in continuation of this fake world scenario, Luke finds his way to the Rebellion's base on Hoth, guided by the voice of Obi-Wan, who you killed back on Tatooine. He's trained into a powerful Jedi, but is no match for Starkiller, and both of his fights are nothing more than passive challenges. He escapes the first encounter by releasing a cage of Wampas, but has no way out during Fight 2. Well, at least physically, after being defeated and told the man he just lost to also killed his father, and like 10 minutes before that his father was Vader, Luke caves to the dark side and kickstarts the final boss of the DLC, Fallen Luke. His health and damage get buffed to oblivion, and he gains new AoEs and Force abilities, putting it on you to be more cautious. I have one single gripe with Fallen Luke, that being this bullshit. I don't care if it's a bug or not, I was infuriated that I died to nothing. But outside of that, it comes down to playing it smart. Once again, be careful, but play a bit offensive to not get overpowered yourself. And once you beat the guy, you can not only feel accomplished, but admire the voice work of the DLCs in general. I don't know what's up, but man, I don't know what the hell. Either way, it was pretty neat fighting a Luke totally opposite the powerful and driven, yet pure version from the original trilogy. From Galen's perspective, this had to be a no-brainer. Vader quite literally killed and used you to gain merit from the Emperor. I also think a more emotional cutscene mixed with a decision would have sufficed, and simply dropping down and getting straight into it was a bit of a disappointment. Well, I'll quickly open up and be honest here, this fight was dead last for me 3 days before I wrote this down. I beat the game and immediately went over to Alex's house to play some Mario Party, and the first thing I said was a minute-long rant about how much this fight sucked. And then the next day I decided to give it another go after pretty much mastering the first Vader and realized it's the exact same fight, just amped in difficulty and a bit more aggravating. The aggravation comes from his unavoidable saber counter. Maybe I'm just playing it wrong, but whenever you go in for a combo, he always seems to counter you and you get bashed heavy for simply attempting to attack him. I'd recommend staying close and constantly dashing. The arena is small and Galen gains a Dark Souls-esque flip move over the normal dash that gives good iframes to roll around. If you get caught in a quick time and come out on top, it's a guaranteed third of his health bar if you combine that with a follow-up ground stab. It's also pretty neat how he has no physical defense and is essentially a damage sponge, which is logical considering he has no armor. I won't get too deep into it, mainly because if it's the same boss like this, I like to save my more in-depth opinions for the latter. I do have a couple other minor grievances, but no matter, this fight is electric, and I know I've said it about 15 times already and it's to be expected of every boss, but the quick time is awesome, not to mention the fight itself is also fair but difficult, so for what it's worth, I really enjoyed this. Surprise, Shaak Ti dies yet again. To my knowledge, this would be the third death on record, but I would say this scenario is the most realistic. A Jedi Master of her caliber would have definitely sensed Anakin's turn and left the temple or died fighting. This one feels most fitting because she was talented enough to survive Order 66, and it makes sense for her to camp out in a secluded world like Felucia. When you find her, she's made peace with the native Felucians and even has a Padawan in Maris Brood. Ganks first became a thing in From Software's Demon's Souls, and sadly this game was developed around the same time, but how perfect this would have been as a gank. Either way, the fight clearly worked out as is. Even so, Phase 1 should have been better in my opinion. Maybe I was just on my A game, but it was way too easy and I beat it in under a minute. The first mission to Felucia introduces Force Repulse, and as it goes for all the main game boss fights, Shaak Ti gets heavily punished by her level's mechanic. Since the arena in general is pretty linear, there's a good chance you'll repulse her into one of those nasty whitehead looking things, and in addition her AI isn't the brightest, she regularly runs into those things anyways. You might have caught a glimpse of a giant Sarlacc in the main menu cutscene, but here it is in HD. Phase 2 is fought quite literally in the Ancient Abyss. In Legends, the Abyss was actually the largest known Sarlacc in the galaxy, and due to its incredible size, this phase is prone to bugs. I mean, what the hell? But yeah, excusing that, Anakin's Dark Deeds boots up in the background and you just continue your destruction of Shaak Ti. The Sarlacc feels like it's a pattern, but I swear every so often it doesn't follow and hits you unfairly. Either way, it was pretty cool seeing Starkiller use the Sarlacc to finish off Shaak Ti, and this fight in general was so unique and awesome from start to finish that even as only the 4th boss in the game, I knew she'd be a chart topper. Now we're really getting down to business. I'd say I enjoy basically all the fights past around number 20, but the top 3 are in a league of their own. At the bottom we have Darth Vader, but man was this thing awesome. I can confidently say I can now beat this fight in under 2 minutes excluding the cutscenes, and it's pretty simple. The first phase is all about positioning and baiting. Most bosses tend to have mechanics that force you to stay close, but Vader's force push actually encourages the opposite. He gets locked into the angle he shoots at when he first revs up, and it's a free 4-hit combo plus knockdown every single time he pulls this. He's also got a multitude of other moves under his belt, but Phase 1 shouldn't be too bad as long as you take advantage of the opportunities the game presents. Phase 2 is completely different from anything else this game puts your way, and unlike Palpatine, while it does introduce a new mechanic, it's fairly obvious what you have to do, and it manages to be both exhilarating but also easy. It really boils down to a 2-step process. Force grip one of the generator cells along the wall and chuck it towards him while he's focused on his own. Once you connect and stagger, you hop on the centerpiece and rack up a mega combo. Just a heads up, you won't take damage on the ground, so be careful to get out before he regains his footing. You can get stuck in infinite loops of him force crushing you and you breaking free over and over, so tank a hit if need be and get back to it. Once he gets pretty low, he goes all out and crushes the entire room like he did in Revenge of the Sith, and this last phase is basically a 2-dimensional variant of Phase 1, but it feels a lot more intense due to an increased aggression and damage output on Vader's behalf. The finisher is, for me, the best in the game, and watching him get clapped like that was pretty gnarly. I have very little to no issues with Darth Vader, and while once again it could have been a lot more intuitive or deeper mechanically, it was both unique and exceptional in comparison to most. While on the rarer side of boss fights, I love skill checks. Proxy is like the 7-star general of skill check bosses, and in the future games need to do things like this more often. And sure, in your average semi-realistic fantasy world, it would break the storyline and likely make no sense for a boss to randomly transform into bosses of old, but the game actually built up Proxy as a character for the sole purpose of this very boss fight. Proxy is a holodroid, a rare class of droid able to morph into a physical hologram of anybody he studies, and that's essentially the fight. It even starts off by faking you and appearing to be just another Shadow Guard, then after you get in some damage it's revealed to be Proxy. Proxy then transforms into Maris Brood and the fight begins. Phase 1 is less a skill check and more a reminder in what bosses are weak to what mechanics, so based on whoever he's morphing into, just use their mechanic from their respective level and go nuts. From that point onwards, it's up to random chance who he transforms into, whether it be Maris, the Shadow Guard, Ram Kota, Shaak Ti, and even Darth Maul? Oh yeah, this was hands down the most kick-ass moment in the game. The second the Duel of the Fates gradually kicked in the background, like, I can't really put it into words, but it felt like watching the Rogue One ending for the first time. It's exactly what you'd want in a Darth Maul boss as well. He's extremely agile and aggressive, not to mention hard to guess due to his dual-bladed lightsaber, and overall it's a thrill. I love how it's up to you to keep pace with him as he can't be beaten through the Force, which leads me to say they nailed Maul's power in this game. Canonically, he's just below Vader, so a slugfest like this is about as accurate as it could have gotten. And due to LucasArts' realistic take on his power and difficulty, this fight blew my socks off. The unexpected twist of fighting an all-time classic Star Wars villain was one of the main highlights of the game, and along with the all-around awesome idea of this fight, makes Proxy deserving of the placement it received. This was the most difficult decision I've had to make in a boss ranking so far. For all the details I enjoy when it comes to Proxy, it makes him equally worthy of this spot, but what separates the Dark Apprentice for me was the all-around suspense, intensity, and difficulty that Proxy was admittedly lacking. Think back to Luke fighting Vader in the Dark Side Cave on Dagobah, or Yoda fighting his Dark Side Shadow on the Wellspring of Life. Those are both examples of the Jedi Trial of Spirit, a quest of self-discovery and determination, and that's also what this fight is based around. What is there to say? You fight yourself, and reasonably so, it is the hardest boss in the game because Darth Starkiller not only knows you, but is you. Playing as Jedi Galen, you have to adapt to being underpowered through taking advantage of the slim number of opportunities you get. I'd recommend going devoid of the Force in general. Your Shadow has a counter to every possible combo or move featuring the Force, and your only reliable damage will come through comboing him off the arena and using lightning while he respawns in the center. He has the same inverse control move as Obi-Wan among others, but Phase 1 isn't too bad as long as you make the most of what you get. In one of the great "that's me" moments in gaming, you get caught in a deadlock and slice off the helmet of this Sith Lord, revealing it to be yourself. Phase 2 is all around intense. It should feel repetitive, but doesn't due to how equal you are in terms of force abilities. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that this phase is the most realistic purely force battle outside of the movies and comics. It really does feel like you're in a mind game trying to outwit your opponent, which leads me into the mechanics. Shadow Galen teleports to an unreachable zone wherein he grabs hold of large chunks of pillars. You need to force grip the pillar before he launches it your way and instead send it towards him. Once he gets staggered, he teleports to the center, in which you get about 2 to 3 seconds to zap him with as much lightning as possible before he force repulses and heads back to his safe zone. That is only for a minute or so. Once he gets down to half health, he goes back to ground level and is essentially a ramped up phase 1. The same rules apply as earlier, look for openings to pounce on in between swings and so on. I managed to beat this thing with quite literally no health, and add on the fact that the quick time is the longest in the game and you've witnessed a Hall of Fame gaming clutch. I might have a bit of bias love for this fight considering, yeah, it is definitely my best ever clutch in a game to date, but I still think objectively the Dark Apprentice makes for a boss worthy of the #1 spot. First of all, thank you so much for watching. This game was, for me, the best in the Star Wars universe to date. Playing as the extremely powerful Starkiller was a much better experience than as Cal Kestis, and the variety in worlds and bosses amplified the experience. While all I've heard is negative after negative after negative, I can't wait to check out the sequel and rank its bosses, and if anything, I have a feeling I'll enjoy it quite a bit. Lastly, make sure to check in next week for our ranking of the bosses of Mario Galaxy. We hope you all enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, and with that said, deuces.